Please send help. I don't know how to create a weekly spread in my bullet journal. I tend to see a lot of the same weekly spreads when scrolling online. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be using the same spreads. It just means that we don't have the tools to create spreads that function and fit our lifestyle. Today, I got you covered. I'm going to go through all of the things on what a weekly is, why to use one in your bullet journal, and how to use it effectively to fit your lifestyle and needs. Let's backtrack just a little bit on what a weekly spread is and why I would need one in my bullet journal. In the simplest terms, a weekly spread is an overview of all the things that you want to get done in your life for 1 week. It's already created at the beginning of the week, and all you have to do is come in and fill out what you have going on for your events, tasks, personal, business, you name it. Because of this, you're able to make sure that you hit all of your important life pillars. Think relationships, careers, finances, self-improvement. This way, the important things don't get pushed out by the less important tasks. Knowing what it is and why it's important really helps guide you to creating that perfect weekly spread. Here, I'm going to walk through my thought process each week on creating a weekly spread and give you the tools to create one, keeping in mind your lifestyle, your goals, and your time. First, let's chat about the tools that I use when creating these weekly spreads. Whenever I create my weekly spreads, I personally like to use an A5 dotted bullet journal. One that I'm using currently is this one here. It's my dusty blue one from my website, but there are so many different sizes and styles of bullet journals that I've compared in the past before. In terms of what I use in my bullet journal, you can just keep it really simple and use a pen. I've used Micron pens in the past before. Currently, I am loving the Zig Memory System pen. I have been using it constantly. Other things that I like to use in my journal is colored markers, stickers, my dot grid ruler to divide the spreads up a little bit easier, and a pencil and eraser just to sketch things out. After that, it's really up to you on what you want to use in your weekly planning just to make it a little bit easier for you in your life. Step number one, the questions that I ask myself each week. For me personally, I love to switch around my weekly layouts in my bullet journal just so I don't get bored. But I also have to make sure that it makes sense for what my priorities are that week. I may have a heavier work week and will need to focus on my top 3 tasks or a master to-do list for my business goals. Other weeks, I might want to focus more so on lifestyle things like meal planning, tracking my gratitude, and I'll have trackers that are formed more around that. It just kind of depends what I have going on which week. So that leads to my first question. What is my priority this week? I also like to ask myself questions of what I liked about the spread I used last week, what worked, what didn't, and then what I disliked about it, how can I change it to improve it? Maybe one thing that I noticed is I didn't have enough room on my spreads to write out a general to-do list, a brain dump of sorts, and I'm gonna want to include that in this week. Something else that I could see as a theme happening is I don't really use my Sundays a lot in my journal, so maybe I want to take that out and just have the weekends combined together as one. These 3 main questions help me each week in creating my weekly spreads, but as you go along, you might find there are a few more questions that you personally like to include when going through and planning out your layout. Past examples. So before we get started and dive into creating the weekly spreads, I thought I would just show you a couple of different journaling layouts that are completely blank that I've shown before on the channel how to create to give us a little bit of a baseline when starting our weekly journey. If you've never done a weekly spread before, these are a great reference or starting place to kind of guide you on what you can do in your bullet journal. You can always switch around things like fonts or colors, decorative elements, keeping it super simple, minimalistic, whatever style is going to suit you and your lifestyle best. You can really just make it your own. These are more of a guide, so I'm not just throwing you into the deep end and expecting you to swim. If you are a beginner to bullet journaling, you might not have previous weeks to look on or reflect and make changes. So go back just to the section before and find one of the weeklies that you think might work for yourself, and we'll do some adjusting in a little bit. If you don't want to do that, no worries, just pick an example that you like, try it out for a week, and then come on back to this section of the video and we can ask ourselves those questions. Question 1, what are you focusing on this week? For me personally, what I have going on this week is I need to create some February Plan With Me stickers. I have to create and edit a YouTube video. I also have 3 shifts at work that I need to do, a family dinner on Saturday, and a bunch of appointments that I am dropping people off during the week. So it's a little bit hectic and a little crazy. Where am I getting this information? I am flipping actually to the beginning of this month's theme and pulling from my monthly calendar so I can kind of have an idea of what tasks I have going on and then prioritize the importance and set my theme for the week. Out of all of these individual to-do items on my list, what is my number one priority this week? It is going to be work. I have a very heavy workload this week and I just want to make sure that all of my focus is on that. Because it's a heavy work week, I know that I work best with one of two things. Either a master to-do list or writing down what my top 3 goals are going to be so it keeps me focused and on track of what my main theme is, which is work this week. Question number 2, what did I like about last week's spread and want to incorporate into this week? I personally enjoy when looking at this weekly layout. I loved the decoration element of it. Yes, it is super simple, but for me personally, it is important to point this out because it makes me more productive as an individual. It makes me want to use my bullet journal and it makes me get tasks done. So I know that including this one thing in my work week is going to definitely help. I also liked that I used the top 3 goals in my bullet journal because it did keep me on track and focused. So that's something that I'm going to re-implement into this week versus just using a master to-do list. Question number 3, what did I dislike or maybe didn't work and I'm going to need to change? For me personally, what I didn't like is that all of my spreads were vertical, which means that my words were all smooshed together and my tasks didn't really have enough space to be written out. So that's definitely something I want to switch around. Also, I didn't really end up using my to-do list on the side, so I think I'm going to not include that this time around and try something a little bit different. I do want to mention though that sometimes this weekly layout works perfectly for me. It's just this past week it didn't, and I want to adjust and make sure that this upcoming week is going to work a little bit better. It's time to create my weekly spread. I'm going to use this weekly layout as my starting example and then switch around the elements that I don't necessarily need. Starting looking at the overall layout, I like that the boxes are horizontal. This kind of combats my issue of the vertical boxes that I had last week and not having enough room to write out my lists across the page. Things that I don't need are going to be the calendar just up at the top of the page. It doesn't really have a practical use for me this week, so I'm just going to get rid of it and replace it with something else that's going to add a little bit more value, like a decorative element. This brings me joy, which makes me want to use my bullet journal, which makes me write down tasks to get checked off, and then I do end up being a lot more productive. Meal planning is not one of my focuses this work week, so instead I think I might try something like a task list, but more of a themed day. So I'll still have Monday to Sunday written out and just theme my day. So maybe I want to do YouTube one day, I want to take photos another day, I have calls the 3rd day, and so on and so forth. This will give me focus for each day and keep me on track for the things I need to get done. At the bottom is the master list and gratitude log. I'm going to completely get rid of this and switch it out with a decorative element. One of the things that I liked from last week was in the zodiac signs, but I wish they were just a little bit bigger because the design kind of got smooshed and didn't have enough detail for my liking. So I'm going to leave the bottom part of the page completely for that. One thing I'm doing right now as well is using a self-care checklist in the morning, and that's replacing that gratitude section, so I don't necessarily feel need to include it in 2 different places. You might really like the way that this week looks, but just not have the titles relate. So you can always switch them out for things like financial goals, fitness routines, prayer and meditation list, anything like that for the heading sections to make it more applicable to your life. After switching up the elements a little bit, this is the weekly layout that I came to. I ended up not including the master to-do list because the more thought that I gave into it, I didn't use it last week and I wanted to include a quote instead. I came across it when I was planning. Quotes help make me motivated, so I thought this would be a good element up at the top. As you can see, I still did include my top 3 goals for each day to help keep me on track for my business, but I also have room to write out just general to-dos on the right side of each of those horizontal boxes as well. I also want to go through a bunch of different weekly spreads and my thought process on how it changed each week. So I'm flipping back to September in my Plan With Me bullet journal and kind of walking you through how I got each weekly spread. The first week here, I had a very similar design to the one that I have now. It's just a little bit different because I had that general to-do list at the top of the page. You can kind of tell it wasn't really working for me because I didn't use the spread to its fullest, so I switched it up just a little bit. Week 2, I divided my page page right down the middle with more of a decorative element with these jellyfish stickers. I left room for notes to be used for just general thoughts, a gratitude list, and a planning for next week. I really loved the creative element, but didn't necessarily like the structure that came along with this because you can tell there are a couple blank spots. So I ended up keeping the decorative elements for week 3 and came up with this. The jellyfish are floating along the side still. I do have theme days so I can track things that are important or scheduled different events. And then I had a general and business master list. I liked the style so much that I ended up doing it again next week. The only thing is that I just switched up dividing my work tasks for better organization. As you can see, one weekly can really inspire the next weekly by just adjusting a few small elements. I personally like to switch up my weeklies on a weekly basis, just switching up the fonts, the color styles that I've used, whether I include stickers or headers or even have a quote in there. But I hope this helps give you a little bit more confidence in creating your own weekly spreads. If you do need a little bit more inspiration on different layout designs for you to tweak and adjust, make sure to check out the step-by-step video that I have on a whole bunch of different weekly layouts, but I will see you in a little bit.